A month after its launch, people are still deciding whether the Nintendo Switch 2 is a great new console or just a predictable upgrade. It's more powerful, more expensive, and has seen its share of controversy. So today, we're answering the biggest question. Is this thing really worth $450? This review isn't simply about whether it's a good console or a bad console. It's a paradox. The Switch 2 is a powerful evolution of the original Switch, and one that Nintendo was due for, but there are still many flaws. We're going to put it all on a scale and see if the good outweighs the bad. We'll be looking at 5 main things. We'll start with performance. Are its specs the real deal? We'll discuss game chat, game share, and the Nintendo Online service to see if it stacks up to the competition. We'll inspect the game key controversy and then discuss if Nintendo truly innovated with the Switch 2. Finally, we'll take a look at what matters most, the games. But before we can talk about that, we need to understand the hardware that they're running on. So let's talk about the Switch 2's performance. Let's be clear, the performance leap isn't just marketing hype. The Switch 2 is a serious upgrade. Nintendo was making a big deal out of the performance upgrades they made to this console, and they weren't kidding around. The console can now consistently run 60 frames per second with a capability to go up to 120 frames per second, though we haven't seen much of that yet. It also uses DLSS or AI upscaling to get a consistent 1080p or even up to 4K on the big screen. And as we've seen with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, these upgrades are serious. Loading times are faster, we're getting a consistent 60 frame rate, and we're able to see Hyrule in a level of detail we could only dream of with the original Switch. But as we've discovered, these aren't the only Nintendo games that have been upscaled. A ton of Switch 1 games have been scaled up to perform better on the Switch 2. These provide a clear picture of what the Switch 2 can do that the original can't. And of course, we have the Cyberpunk 2077 port to show us a world that I never expected to see on a Nintendo console. But there are a couple of major catches. The first is the strange blurry effect that everyone is talking about. This effect is due to a slow pixel response time on the new LCD screen, which creates some motion blur in fast-paced games in particular. This is a visual downgrade that punishes players for playing their existing library. It makes your favorite games look worse on a console that should make them look better. And while your old ones look worse, your new ones will be cut short with the limited battery life. You're going to get anywhere between 2.5 and 6 hours of handheld playtime, and it will definitely fall on the lower end with some of the most demanding games. So yeah, the upgrades are real. The graphical leap is undeniable, and the new games feel better than ever. But this win is held back by 2 significant problems: the blurry rendering of games and a battery that feels a generation behind. It doesn't make it a deal breaker, but it takes what should be an easy win and turns it into a compromise. A major selling point for the Switch 2 was Nintendo's new social features. Game Chat allows you to play with and talk to your friends directly on the console, and Game Share lets you play games with your friends even if they don't already have the game. Think Download Play on the DS, and these are both massive wins for Nintendo. Social features have always been lacking on Nintendo consoles, and this finally seamlessly integrates them with the platform itself. But there's a catch. Nintendo's offline offerings are still nowhere close to the competition's. Microsoft's Game Pass and Sony's PlayStation Plus still significantly surpass the Nintendo Switch Online service. They both have expensive catalogs with Netflix models that allow you to play a ton of different games. Nintendo only offers its retro catalog. Both subscriptions have integrated cloud streaming that lets you play your favorite games from anywhere. Nintendo doesn't. And Nintendo Switch Online is still missing pretty basic stuff like game invites, achievements, and even communication through text. So let's be clear, Game Chat and Game Share are major wins for a company that has traditionally provided minimal support to gamers that want to play with their friends online. They've proven that they can build a modern social system, which makes it more surprising that it lacks things like achievements and party invites. The new features are an undeniable win for players, but they also remind us just how much more Nintendo could do. The idea of physical media in gaming has been getting blurrier for years. Recent Call of Duty games like Modern Warfare only have installers on their discs, and you have to download the other 150 gigabytes. Doom the Dark Ages and Indiana Jones and the Great Circle only contain small amounts of data on their physical releases with a mandatory download. And games like Star Wars Jedi Survivor include massive mandatory day one patches that render the game unplayable without downloading them. And that brings us to Nintendo's Game Key cartridges, which is an honest and alarming continuation of this trend. Nintendo has established that some game cards will instead be game keys, which do not contain the game's data. Instead, they're just a key that allows you to download the game data. When using game key cards, you don't actually own the game. You simply own a trigger for the game's download. This is very bad for video game ownership. If these games have no physical copies, you're not actually buying the game. Everything stays on Nintendo's servers. It acts as a license, not a lifetime purchase. There are also major concerns about game preservation. If there is no cartridge with a physical copy of the game, digital preservation is the only other option, which is a legally murky territory that leaves the future of these games in the hands of a few dedicated fans. While this is a major and concerning industry trend, we haven't seen a major company embrace it as fully as Nintendo. For those passionate about game preservation and those with a reasonable expectation that physical copies actually act as physical copies, this could be a major deal breaker for the Switch 2, and I wouldn't blame you. When the original Switch came out, it took the world by storm. The idea of a hybrid console, a console that can be played anywhere in the world or on the big screen, had never been done so seamlessly. In a line of extremely innovative Nintendo consoles, it managed to stand out. And let's be honest, the Switch 2 is not an innovation. People are calling it the long-awaited Switch Pro, and it's hard to disagree with that. The UI is essentially the same and the core concept is exactly the same. It doesn't have that same wow factor. But honestly, the Switch is one of the best-selling consoles of all time. Nintendo knew that making a sequel to the console would be a sure thing. And as they saw with the failure of the Wii U, making too many changes to what is otherwise a tried-and-true formula can lead to failure. So making a better version of what had already worked so well was a safe bet and a smart call. There is a massive audience for the Switch, and Nintendo knows it. So they decided to play it safe and give the people more of what they want. There are two perspectives on this, both of which are valid. On one hand, you could be the audience that Nintendo is targeting here. You loved the Switch 1 and wanted a more powerful version, and got it with the Switch 2. However, many Nintendo fans love how out there Nintendo can get with their consoles. In the past, each Nintendo console has given fans a new, exciting way to play. But this is just more of the same. And that makes the Switch 2 a safe, financially sound bet that may be their most creatively disappointing console to date. So, the hardware is exciting, but its potential is compromised. But hardware is useless without games to use it, and there's a lot to talk about. When considering the value of a new console, there are two main factors that are important. First, what is available right now? If you bought a Switch 2 in July of 2025, would you have things to play? And secondly, what is coming down the pipeline? Is buying a Switch 2 right now a good investment based on what we can expect in the next year? But first, let's talk about the launch titles. Let's get the obvious out of the way. There is a single major exclusive on release for the Switch 2, Mario Kart World. It's a massive system seller and almost 80% of Switch 2 buyers bought Mario Kart World. This is the game for Nintendo fans. But the only game that you need the new console for is Mario Kart. Everything else can be played elsewhere. There are plenty of ports and upgrades. Cyberpunk has a port, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom both have upgraded versions, and many Switch 1 games got Switch 2 updates for increased performance. But there's only one brand new next-gen experience available on launch for the Switch 2. This is a relatively thin launch lineup. There's only one brand new exclusive, so your willingness to buy the console may totally hinge on whether you're interested in the new Mario Kart. But Nintendo has used this strategy before. The Switch 1's release was completely carried by the release of Breath of the Wild, which wasn't even an exclusive. It could be played on the Wii U. And a major part of that is because they had a ton of games coming down the pipeline. Before the console even came out, we knew that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, ARMS, Splatoon 2, Super Mario Odyssey, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 were all coming out that year. It's a good strategy because it ensures that by year's end, every Nintendo fan will have something to play. But it also means that the specific launch period is less emphasized. They played the long game, which is bold, and they're doing it again with the Switch 2. Donkey Kong Bonanza releases in July. Pokemon Legends Z to A is in October. We're getting Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment, Kirby Air Riders, and Metroid Prime 4 by the end of the year. And into 2026, we're getting Splatoon Raiders and the duskbloods, a FromSoft exclusive. So yeah, more games are coming down the pipeline. While the Switch 2 will eventually have an experience for every type of Nintendo fan, they aren't providing a massive reason to buy it from day one. Nintendo is making the same bet that they did on the original Switch. They're betting that you will buy the console based on the promise of what is yet to come, rather than what is already available on the platform. And as a consumer, your job is to decide whether you're willing to pay full price for a promise. So we've talked about the hardware and we've talked about the software. Now, we need to answer the question we started with. Is the Nintendo Switch 2 really worth $450? The performance upgrades are the real deal, but there are a few frustrating drawbacks that prevent it from being a big win. The social features are an encouraging development from a company that has held back on them for so long, but there's still a long way to go. The game key system is a concerning choice from a company that is already often tied to anti-consumer decisions, but is representative of a gaming trend that goes beyond any one company. It's one of the least innovative consoles in Nintendo's storied history, but it perfects the vision that they had with the original Switch. And there are plenty of games to be excited about in the future, but very few of them are available at launch. So, is the Switch 2 passing or failing? The truth is, it gets two different grades. If you're a die-hard Nintendo fan that loves the ecosystem, can't wait to play Mario Kart, and are counting down the days until Metroid Prime 4, it's an easy A. It's a major necessary upgrade that improves the games you love and paves the way for a great future. You should get your hands on one as soon as possible. But for the more casual fans, someone on a budget, or someone that's just totally satisfied with the original Switch, it gets an incomplete. This is a console whose biggest strengths are promises for the future. There's lots of potential, but it's still only that, potential. Ultimately, Nintendo has built a powerful foundation for the future with plenty to be excited for, but they're asking you to pay for that future today, and it's up to you to decide whether it's worth the price of admission. Thanks for watching.